In the blistering heat of a Columbus garage, a talented mechanic faced a wealthy client's cruel rejection, her skills dismissed by prejudice, until a shocking reveal turned the tables, sparking a movement that would inspire the nation to demand respect for all. Jasmine Carter pulled her beat-up pickup truck into the lot of Elite Auto Solutions, the high-end garage she'd quietly purchased in Columbus, Ohio, on a swelteringly unbearable afternoon in July 2024. The sun beating down on the asphalt with a relentless fury that made the air shimmer with waves of heat. At 38, Jasmine was a black woman whose calloused hands told stories of years spent under car hoods, her fingers rough from countless hours of tightening bolts and changing oil, her sharp mind honed by a lifetime of defying stereotypes in a male-dominated field where she'd often been the only woman and the only person of color in the room. Today, she wore a faded jumpsuit smeared with grease, the fabric worn thin at the knees from years of kneeling beside engines. Her decision to dress this way deliberate. She wanted to see how her staff treated customers when the new owner wasn't watching. A test of their integrity that weighed heavily on her mind. She stepped out of the truck, her sneakers crunching against the gravel, her dark eyes scanning the garage's sleek facade, its glass windows reflecting the harsh sunlight, the faint scent of motor oil and rubber hanging in the air like a familiar friend, though the weight of her secret mission sat heavy on her shoulders, a quiet determination burning beneath her calm exterior, a fire that had been stoked by years of proving herself in a world that often refused to see her worth. She paused for a moment, wiping the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, the heat pressing down on her like a physical force, her thoughts drifting to the day she'd finalized the purchase of Elite Auto Solutions, a moment of triumph that had felt like a culmination of all her struggles. The late nights studying automotive manuals, while her peers partied, the dismissive comments from customers who'd rather speak to the guy in charge, the quiet pride in her father's eyes when she'd told him she'd bought the garage, his weathered hands trembling as he'd pulled her into a hug, whispering, "You did it, baby girl." That memory anchored her now, a reminder of why she was here, why she'd chosen to walk into her own business as a stranger, her heart beating with a mix of anticipation and dread as she prepared to face whatever truths this day would reveal. Truths that would test not just her staff, but her own resilience in the face of the prejudice she knew still lingered in the world. A sleek black sedan screeched to a halt near the entrance, its tires kicking up a cloud of dust that stung Jasmine's eyes. Its driver, a white man in his 50s named Victor Langston, stepping out in a tailored suit that screamed wealth, his polished shoes gleaming as he adjusted his cufflinks with an air of impatience. His presence a stark contrast to the dusty lot and the modest jumpsuit Jasmine wore. Victor's suit was a deep charcoal gray, the kind of fabric that shimmered subtly in the sunlight, his cufflinks catching the light with a glint of silver. A man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not a garage, his every movement radiating a sense of entitlement that made Jasmine's stomach tighten. With a familiar unease, she noticed a flat tire on his car, the rim nearly scraping the ground, the rubber shredded from what must have been a brutal puncture, and she approached with a calm professionalism, her voice steady despite the heat prickling her skin, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and apprehension as she prepared to offer her help. "Looks like you've got a flat," she said, gesturing to the tire with a grease-stained hand, her tone warm but professional. "I can get that fixed for you in no time. Just need a few minutes to grab my tools and set up." Victor's gaze snapped to her, his blue eyes narrowing as he took in her jumpsuit, the grease smudges on her sleeves, the worn sneakers on her feet. A sneer curling his lips as he assessed her in a single dismissive glance, his voice dripping with disdain as he replied, "I'd rather speak to someone." The word laced with an unspoken assumption that cut deeper than Jasmine expected, her stomach twisting with a familiar pang of rejection she'd felt since her early days in the industry, a wound that had been reopened countless times over the years. The way he said qualified carried a weight that went beyond her skills. It was a judgment on her appearance, her race, her very existence in this space, a judgment that echoed the voices of so many others who doubted her over the years. Voices that had once made her question herself, but now only fueled her resolve to prove them wrong. She stood there for a moment, her breath catching in her throat, the heat of the sun suddenly feeling colder than the iciest rejection, her mind racing with memories of being overlooked, her first job at 19 when a customer had laughed in her face saying, "You're too pretty to be a mechanic," his words a backhanded insult that had stung her pride but lit a fire in her soul, a fire that had driven her to work harder, to be better, to show the world that she belonged. Victor's rejection stung, but Jasmine kept her composure, her hands clenching briefly before she forced them to relax, her fingers trembling slightly as she fought the urge to snap back, to defend herself against the unfairness of his words, her mind a whirlwind of emotions as she remembered the countless times she'd had to swallow her pride, to smile through the pain, to keep going even when the world told her she didn't belong. She nodded curtly, her jaw tight, her dark eyes flashing with a quiet defiance as she stepped back, her sneakers scuffing the gravel, the sound a small rebellion against the silence that followed Victor's words. Victor marched toward the garage entrance, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement, his voice booming as he demanded to speak to the manager, his tone sharp and commanding, leaving Jasmine standing in the heat, her heart pounding with a mix of anger and resolve, the unfairness of his judgment a spark that would soon ignite a fire she couldn't yet foresee, a fire that would challenge not just Victor, but the very stereotypes that had tried to define her for years, a fire that would burn brighter with every step she took toward proving him wrong. Victor stormed into the garage, his voice echoing off the concrete walls as he berated the staff, his impatience a thundercloud that darkened the already tense atmosphere, his words sharp and cutting as he demanded, "I need a real mechanic, not some charity case playing dress-up." The insult rang out like a gunshot, the words reverberating through the garage, each syllable a dagger that pierced Jasmine's pride, her jaw tightening as she trailed behind, the sting of his earlier rejection now a burning ember in her chest, a fire that threatened to consume her if she didn't channel it into something productive. She kept her distance, her dark eyes narrowing as she observed how her team responded to his outburst, her heart pounding with a mix of hurt and determination, her fingers gripping the tire iron in her hand so tightly that her knuckles turned pale, the cold metal a grounding force against the storm of emotions raging inside her. The head mechanic, a wiry man in his 40s named Carlos Rivera, stepped forward, his hands stained with oil, his brown eyes flickering with unease as he glanced at Jasmine, unaware of her true identity but sensing the unfairness of Victor's tone, his own experiences with prejudice making him bristle at the man's words, a quiet anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. Carlos was a man who'd spent his life in garages, his own journey marked by the same kind of dismissive attitudes Victor now displayed, years of being overlooked because of his accent, his heritage, his worn-out work boots, all of which had taught him the value of fairness, a value he now saw being trampled under Victor's polished shoes. "Sir, we'll get your tire fixed," Carlos said, his voice calm but firm, his accent a soft undercurrent that spoke of his roots in Puerto Rico. "But everyone here is qualified. I can vouch for that, and I've been in this business long enough to know talent when I see it." His words were a quiet defense, a small act of solidarity that warmed Jasmine's heart, a glimmer of hope in the darkness of Victor's disdain, a reminder that there were still people who believed in fairness, even in a world that often forgot its meaning. Carlos' defense was a small glimmer of hope, a sign that not everyone in the garage shared Victor's prejudice, but Victor scoffed, his arms crossing, as he pointed a finger at Jasmine, who stood near the entrance with a tire iron in hand, her presence a quiet challenge he couldn't ignore, her stance unwavering despite the weight of his words, her dark eyes locked on him with a fire that refused to be extinguished. "Her? She doesn't belong here," he sneered, his voice loud enough for the entire garage to hear, his tone dripping with contempt. "I don't trust my car with someone who looks like they can't even afford a decent uniform, probably can't tell a wrench from a screwdriver." The words hit Jasmine like a slap, her breath catching as she fought the urge to respond, her chest tightening with a mix of anger and humiliation, her mind flashing to a memory of her father, a mechanic who'd taught her everything, telling her, "They'll always underestimate you, but your work will speak louder than their words," a lesson that had carried her through countless moments of doubt, a lesson that now anchored her against the storm of Victor's disdain. giving her the strength to stand tall, even as his words tried to tear her down. A young apprentice named Mia, a Latina woman in her 20s, says, with a quick smile and a spark of defiance in her eyes, overheard Victor's outburst and frowned, her hands pausing on the wrench she held, her disapproval a silent rebellion that gave Jasmine a flicker of comfort in the storm, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone in this fight, that there were others who saw the injustice unfolding before them. Mia was new to the garage, her own dreams of becoming a mechanic inspired by her older brother, who'd taught her the basics before he'd passed away in a car accident, a loss that had fueled her determination to honor his memory by succeeding in this field, a determination that now made her bristle at Victor's words. Her own experiences with judgment as a young Latina woman in a male-dominated industry giving her a deep empathy for Jasmine, an empathy that shone through in the way she tightened her grip on the wrench, her knuckles whitening as she fought the urge to speak out, her silence a quiet promise of support that Jasmine felt even from across the room. The tension in the garage thickened, the hum of machinery a stark contrast to the silence that followed Victor's words, every eye darting between him and Jasmine, who stood motionless, her resolve hardening as she realized this wasn't just about her, it was about every person who'd ever been judged for their appearance, a realization that fueled her determination to turn this moment into something greater, her hurt transforming into a fierce resolve to prove Victor wrong, to show him that her skills, her worth, couldn't be diminished by his prejudice. Carlos shot Jasmine a sympathetic glance, his hands fidgeting with a rag as he whispered to Mia, "He's got no idea who he's talking to," a small hint of defiance in his tone that hinted at a deeper loyalty to fairness, a loyalty Jasmine would soon lean on as the storm grew darker, her resolve now a quiet fire that burned brighter with every passing second, a fire that would soon blaze into a reckoning that would change everything. Victor's impatience reached a boiling point as he slammed his hand on the counter, the sharp crack of his palm against the metal surface sending a jolt through the garage, the sound reverberating in the heavy silence that followed, his voice growling, rattling the tools on the nearby workbench, his words slicing through the air like a blade, each syllable dripping with contempt. "If you can't get me someone competent, I'm taking my business elsewhere," he barked, his face flushed with anger, his blue eyes blazing with fury that made the staff shrink back, their shoulders hunching as if shielding themselves from the storm of his wrath. His disdain for Jasmine now a public spectacle that left everyone visibly uneasy, tension in the room so thick it felt like a storm about to break, brewing since the moment Victor had first dismissed her. Jasmine stepped forward, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest, the rhythm serving as a steady reminder of her resolve, her voice unwavering, her dark eyes locking onto Victor's with quiet intensity that made him falter for a split second, cracking his armor, which she seized with steadfast determination, her presence silently demanding to be acknowledged. "I'll fix your tire," she said, her tone leaving no room for argument, her words thrown down as a gauntlet in the face of his prejudice. "And I'll do it faster than anyone else here. Give me 10 minutes. Jasmine knelt beside the sedan, her hands moving with the precision of years spent mastering her craft, her fingers deftly positioning the jack under the car, the faint squeak of the jack matching the rhythm of her steady breathing, echoing her determination in the otherwise silent garage, where every eye watched her every move with bated breath. Their gazes mixing curiosity and apprehension, she worked with focus that shut out Victor's earlier insults, her movements swift and confident, each turn of the wrench testifying to the skill she'd honed through years of facing doubt and prejudice. Her jumpsuit now streaked with fresh grease as she removed the damaged tire, the rubber shredded and worn, contrasting sharply with the sleek sedan it belonged to, reminding everyone of the fragility beneath Victor's polished exterior. Her mind flashed to years ago when her father had watched her fix her first flat tire, his proud smile steadying her now, his voice echoing in her ears as he'd said, "You've got the hands of a master, Jasmine. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." That memory bringing the faintest smile to her lips, speaking of the strength she'd inherited, strength that had carried her through countless moments of doubt, fueling her as she worked under the weight of Victor's gaze. Victor watched from a distance, his arms crossed tightly over his chest, his sneer replaced by doubt as he noticed the ease with which she worked, her skill contradicting his earlier assumptions, though his pride wouldn't let him admit it, his jaw tightening as he grappled with the growing realization that he might have underestimated her, his polished shoes tapping lightly against the concrete floor. Betraying the cracks in his confidence with that nervous habit, he shifted his weight, his cufflinks catching the fluorescent light with their silver glint, his mind racing as he tried to reconcile the image of Jasmine, grease-stained and unassuming, with the undeniable expertise she displayed, the conflict gnawing at him, though he refused to let it show, his sneer returning to mask his uncertainty. Carlos stood nearby, his oil-stained hands clasped together, his brown eyes flickering with pride and anticipation, the man who'd seen talent overlooked too many times in his own career, his own experiences with prejudice making him root for Jasmine in silence, his heart swelling with quiet hope that she'd prove Victor wrong, hope mirroring the growing respect he felt for the woman he still believed to be just another mechanic, respect that would soon be tested by the truth. Mia approached quietly, her steps soft against the concrete floor, her hands trembling slightly as she handed Jasmine the new tire, the rubber heavy in her arms, her voice low as she whispered, "I've seen you work on worse. This guy doesn't know what he's missing," her words offering subtle solidarity that warmed Jasmine's heart, reminding her that she wasn't alone in this fight, even as Victor's shadow loomed over her, his presence pressing down with constant pressure she refused to let break her. From Mia's perspective, Jasmine was pure force of nature, her hands moving with grace that belied the strength behind them, the woman who'd earned her place in this garage through sheer grit, someone Mia admired more with every passing second, her own dreams of becoming a mechanic now tied to the hope that she could one day be as fearless as Jasmine, hope shining in her quick smile, reflecting the future she was determined to build, inspired by the woman kneeling before her. The tire was fixed in under 10 minutes, the new rubber gleaming as Jasmine lowered the car with practiced hands, her jumpsuit now covered in grease stains serving as badges of honor that spoke louder than Victor's insults, her gaze meeting his with quiet defiance that made him shift uncomfortably, his earlier confidence cracking like thin ice. That moment of clarity setting the stage for the reckoning neither of them could have predicted, as Jasmine's true identity waited in the wings, ready to turn the tables in a way that would leave the entire garage in awe. Jasmine stood, wiping her hands on the rag, the coarse fabric rough against her skin, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths, the anger that had simmered beneath her resolve now giving way to quiet confidence. Belief in her own abilities that Victor's words couldn't shake, confidence fueling her determination to confront him head-on, her dark eyes burning with fire that promised she wouldn't back down, no matter what came next. She had moved from the place of hurt, the sting of his rejection still fresh, to the place of empowerment, her skill serving as the shield against his prejudice, the shield she now wielded with strength that came from years of proving herself in the world that often refused to see her worth. Strength forged in the fires of adversity, strength that now stood ready to face whatever challenge Victor would throw her way. Her heart steady with the knowledge that she'd already won the battle he didn't even know he'd lost, her resolve lighting the path forward. Victor inspected the tire with a grudging nod, his lips pursed as he muttered, "Not bad, for someone like you," his backhanded compliment, the final jab that made Jasmine's blood boil, the words sparking the fire she'd been holding back. Fire that had been smoldering since the moment he'd dismissed her, now roaring to life as her patience finally snapped, her heart racing with the mix of fury and pride, her hands clenching the rag so tightly her knuckles turned pale. She straightened, her voice cutting through the hum of the garage like the blade, her dark eyes blazing with fire that had been smoldering since the moment Victor had dismissed her. Fire that now burned brightly as she took control of the moment. Her presence the force that demanded attention, the force that refused to be ignored. "Someone like me," she repeated, her tone sharp enough to make Victor flinch, her words the challenge that echoed through the silent garage, the challenge that carried the weight of every insult she'd ever endured, every moment of doubt she'd ever faced. "You mean the owner of this garage?" The words dropped like the bombshell, the entire garage falling silent, the air thick with shock as every head turned to Jasmine. Her revelation the lightning strike that shifted the balance of power in an instant, the weight of her truth, the force that reshaped the room, the force that left everyone reeling in its wake. Carlos's jaw dropped, his rag slipping from his hand as he stammered, You're the owner?" His disbelief mirroring the stunned expressions of the other staff, his brown eyes wide with awe and realization. The man who'd defended Jasmine now seeing her in new light, the leader who'd been hiding in plain sight, the leader he'd unknowingly stood up for. His heart swelling with pride he couldn't quite put into words. Pride that came from knowing he'd been right to believe in her. Mia's eyes lit up with the blend of admiration and pride, her earlier support now validated in the way she hadn't expected, her quick smile spreading across her face as she whispered to herself, "I knew she was special." Her perspective one of reverence for the woman who'd just turned her quiet strength into the roar that echoed through the garage, the roar that inspired Mia to believe in her own potential, belief that would shape her future in ways she couldn't yet imagine, her hands trembling with excitement as she clutched the wrench she still held, the wrench that now felt like the symbol of the dreams she'd one day achieve, dreams that Jasmine had just made feel possible. Victor's face drained of color, his earlier arrogance crumbling like dry sand as he took the step back, his polished shoes scuffing the floor, the sound faintly echoing his fading confidence, his voice barely the whisper as he choked out, "That's impossible." His world unraveling in the face of Jasmine's truth, his hands trembling as he struggled to process the reality of his mistake, his cufflinks glinting faintly in the fluorescent light, reminding him of the wealth that had once made him feel untouchable, wealth that now meant nothing in the face of Jasmine's power. Jasmine stepped closer, her presence commanding the room, her voice steady but laced with quiet fury, her dark eyes locked on Victor as she spoke, her words the declaration that echoed off the concrete walls, the declaration that carried the weight of every struggle she'd faced to get here, every late night spent studying manuals, every dismissive comment she'd endured, every moment she'd had to prove herself twice as hard as anyone else. "I bought Elite Auto Solutions last month," she said, her tone unwavering, her voice the steady force that filled the room. "And I came here today to see how my team treats customers. Turns out, some customers need to learn how to treat people." The reversal was complete. Victor's authority stripped away as Jasmine stood tall, her jumpsuit the symbol of the resilience that had carried her through years of prejudice. Resilience that now held the power to change everything. Her hands still stained with grease, but her posture that of the leader who'd just claimed her rightful place. The leader who'd turned the tables on the man who'd thought he could define her worth. The man who now stood before her, humbled by the truth she'd revealed. Victor stammered, his hands trembling as he tried to salvage his dignity, his tailored suit suddenly feeling too tight, his polished exterior no match for the raw power of Jasmine's presence, but Jasmine cut him off, her gaze sweeping the room as she addressed the staff, her voice rising with fire that had been smoldering for years, fire that now burned with the intensity of her purpose, fire that lit up the faces of everyone around her. "This garage is the place of skill, not stereotypes," she said, her words the vow, the commitment to her team and to herself, her voice radiating hope that cut through the silence. "And, if anyone, customer or staff, can't respect that, they don't belong here." The staff nodded, their faces the mix of awe and agreement, their eyes reflecting the light of Jasmine's conviction that spoke to their own experiences, their own struggles, conviction that made them stand taller, their hands clapping softly in quiet support that filled the room with warmth that had been missing moments before. Victor stood frozen, his world turned upside down by the woman he'd underestimated, the woman whose quiet strength had just sparked the revolution that would ripple far beyond the walls of Elite Auto Solutions, the revolution that would change the way they all saw the world, the revolution that began with a single tire, the moment of defiance, the truth that had the power to reshape everything. Jasmine's emotions had evolved from the quiet confidence of proving her skill to fierce pride in her identity, pride that came from owning her truth, from standing up to the prejudice that had tried to define her, pride that now radiated from her like the beacon, inspiring those around her to see the world through her eyes, the world where respect was non-negotiable, the world she was determined to create, tire by tire, heart by heart, with every victory she claimed. Victor stood motionless in the center of the garage, his earlier bravado replaced by stunned silence, his hands fidgeting with his cufflinks, the silver glinting dully under the fluorescent lights, each nervous twist betraying the turmoil within him as he struggled to process Jasmine's revelation. The weight of his mistake pressing down on him like an unyielding force. Jasmine turned to him, her expression softening just enough to offer the chance at redemption, though her dark eyes still held the fire of her conviction, her voice firm yet carrying the undercurrent of kindness that had always defined her, even in the face of cruelty. "In giving you the choice, Mr. Langston," she said, her gaze searching his, seeking the flicker of remorse she hoped to find, "apologize and learn from this or take your business elsewhere. I won't tolerate disrespect in my garage." Victor hesitated, his pride warring with the reality of his situation. The tailored suit that once made him feel untouchable, now a stifling reminder of his arrogance, but the sincerity in Jasmine's stare broke through his defenses, his shoulders slumping as he nodded, his voice low and shaky, the words foreign on his tongue as he forced them out. I'm sorry," he said, his blue eyes dropping to the floor, unable to meet hers. "I was wrong. I judged you, and I shouldn't have." The apology, though halting, was the small victory Jasmine had hoped for, the first crack in the wall of prejudice that had defined their encounter, and she nodded in acknowledgement, her heart lighter as she saw the initial step toward change, the change she'd fought for her entire career, her chest rising with the breath of relief that mingled with cautious hope. She turned to the staff, her voice steady but infused with the resolve that had carried her through the day, her dark eyes sweeping the room as she spoke, her words the declaration of the new era for Elite Auto Solutions. "We're implementing new policies, starting today," she announced, her tone unwavering, "training on respect and inclusivity for everyone, staff and clients alike." Carlos stepped forward, his oil-stained hands clapping softly, the sound echoing faintly in the garage, his brown eyes shining with pride as he looked at Jasmine, his voice thick with emotion as he said, "You've got my support, boss. I've seen too many good people overlooked in this industry." Mia joined in, her quick smile brighter than ever, her hands still clutching the wrench as she added, her voice trembling with admiration, "You're the inspiration, Ms. Carter. I want to be like you someday." Her words the testament to the ripple effect of Jasmine's courage that had turned the moment of rejection into the movement for change that now united them all. As the day drew to the close, Jasmine stood outside the garage with Carlos and Mia, watching as Victor drove away, his sedan rolling smoothly on the tires she'd fixed, now the symbol of the lesson hard learned. The setting sun casting long shadows across the lot, the golden light softening the harsh edges of the day. Jasmine had grown from the mechanic hiding her identity to the leader who'd used her position to demand respect, her resolve now radiating as the beacon for her team, the testament to the power of standing up against prejudice, even when the odds were stacked against her, her jumpsuit still smeared with grease, but her posture that of the woman who'd claimed her place in the world. From Mia's perspective, Jasmine was more than the boss. She was the symbol of what was possible, the woman who'd turned pain into purpose, her quick smile now the reflection of her own dreams taking root, dreams of one day standing in Jasmine's shoes, her hands tightening around the wrench as she imagined the future where she, too, could challenge the stereotypes that had once held her back. The day had begun with Jasmine's quiet hope of uncovering the truth about her garage, but it ended with the fierce pride of knowing she'd sparked the change that would ripple far beyond the walls of Elite Auto Solutions. The pride that warmed her as she stood with her team, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The promise of the better tomorrow written in the fading light. Jasmine's emotions had evolved through the ordeal, the quiet hope she'd held at the start of the day, hope that her team would prove their worth, transforming into the fierce pride that now coursed through her veins, pride in her identity, her team, and the movement she'd ignited with her defiance. The chitiet coup of the setting sun casting long shadows across the lot added the tangible layer to the scene, grounding the emotional shift in the physical world, while Mia's perspective offered the new angle, her admiration for Jasmine now tinged with the personal aspiration that would shape her own journey, the wrench in her hands the silent promise of her future ambition. 2 years later, Elite Auto Solutions had transformed into the beacon of change in Columbus, its reputation no longer just about luxury repairs but about respect and inclusivity. The garage's walls now adorned with photos of community outreach events, each frame capturing the smiles of mechanics and clients alike, the testament to the movement Jasmine had sparked that day with Victor, the movement that had grown into the legacy of fairness. The policies she'd implemented had spread to other garages across Ohio. Her story featured in local news as the call to action, leading to the creation of the Carter Respect Initiative, the program Jasmine founded to train mechanics and clients alike on fairness and dignity, ensuring that no one would be judged by their appearance again. The legacy that honored her father's lessons and her own unyielding spirit, her dark eyes misting with emotion whenever she saw the program's logo, the wrench crossed with the olive branch, painted on the side of the garage, the symbol of peace and strength intertwined. Jasmine, now the respected leader in the industry, worked alongside Carlos and Mia, who'd both risen in the ranks. Carlos as head of training, his own experiences with prejudice fueling his passion. His voice steady as he taught new apprentices the importance of respect. And Mia as the lead mechanic, her quick smile the light for every new apprentice who walked through the doors, her laughter the sound Jasmine cherished during their weekly meetings, the reminder of the bond they'd forged through shared struggle. At the statewide conference, Jasmine stood on stage, her jumpsuit replaced by the sharp blazer, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd, her dark eyes alight with purpose, her words carrying the weight of her journey. "Respect isn't the luxury, it's the necessity," she said, her words the vow, the reminder of the power of standing up, power that had transformed the industry, power that had transformed her, her hands no longer stained with grease but her heart still beating with the rhythm of the garage that had shaped her. Carlos watched from the audience, his heart swelling with pride, the man who'd once doubted his own voice, now the champion for change, change that would echo for generations, his oil-stained hands clapping louder than anyone else's, his brown eyes reflecting the light of Jasmine's purpose. From the perspective of the apprentices who filled the conference hall, Jasmine was the hero, the reminder that skill and character could overcome any stereotype. Their applause the chorus of hope that echoed beyond the room, hope that inspired them to demand better in their own lives, their hands clutching notebooks filled with lessons they'd learned from her story, lessons they'd carry into their own careers. Dear viewer, Jasmine's story shows us that respect can heal the deepest divides, that the single act of courage can change the industry if we're brave enough to act. Have you ever faced prejudice and turned it into the moment of strength? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear your victories just like Jasmine's. If this story touched you, like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more tales of justice and kindness, stories that remind us of the power we hold to make the difference. Let's build the world where respect isn't the dream, where no one is judged by their cover, because change starts with us, with you, with every heart we lift. Jasmine's emotions had shifted from the fierce pride of her initial victory to the quiet fulfillment of seeing her legacy take root. Fulfillment that came from knowing her father's lessons had found new life in the Carter Respect Initiative, the program that would ensure her fight for fairness lived on. The chitiet coup de off the wrench crossed with the olive branch painted on the garage wall added the visual anchor to her legacy, the symbol that encapsulated her journey, while the apprentice's perspective brought the new angle, their admiration for Jasmine now the catalyst for their own aspirations, their notebooks the tangible proof of the impact she'd made on the next generation.